one of the things that kind of evolved out of that emerged out of that was kind of interesting, certainly for me to begin with, but certainly for a lot of clients who we would be recruiting for, is this notion that the best kind of salesperson is an extrovert. Turns out to be wrong, false, right? We now have scientific proof, having profiled thousands and thousands and thousands of top quartile B2B solution sellers, that in actual fact, the best of them are what we would describe as ambiverts, right? So clearly you can't be a deep introvert and somebody who hides out in a cave, but this raging extrovert who is the life of the party really does not fly in today's buying world, right? The ambivert is the person who does.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined today by James Michael. Today it's going to be a bit different. We're going to turn things upside down, which is kind of relevant because James is sat in Australia and I'm sat here in the UK. And the reason I sort of say we're going to do this is that James is going to interview me more than I'm going to interview him. So yeah, we thought we'd have a bit of fun turning it around like this. So James, you know your stuff really well, but I do know about your stuff. I've seen your website and all of your competitors. So actually, I have got a good sense of the stuff that's there, and I'd just buy it if I could, but I'm not quite sure. But just telling me the stuff that I already know when I was looking anyway isn't going to help. Sit down with me and help me get clarity around what it is I'm actually trying to do. That for me just is such a better approach, and that's how to differentiate, because it's I'll talk to you because that conversation's valuable. Talking about all the added value your company gives, I don't really care about that. You are adding value. Talk to me because I can see what I need to do now. Thank you. But I think we still sometimes miss that.
So let's dig into that a little bit more, particularly because of the spaces that you and I both prefer to work in. So, you use the term that I use as a generalized kind of description, cement. So that's CEMMT, construction, engineering, manufacturing, mining, and transport logistics. So they're the spaces I prefer to work in.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we don't have mining.
Yeah, okay.
Where I'm sat here is in the middle of the old coal mining area. But yeah,
right.
We have a tin mine in Cornwall or something. But sorry, I interrupted you. Very bad.
No,
we'll talk about sales skills in a bit.
Yeah, we'll get there. So those spaces typically are populated with people who I would say, and I use this in the broad term sense of the word, populated with people who are quite technically minded. Yeah, they understand the intricacies of their product and their service. They know, the PSI and the diameter and all those sorts of things, and have always prided themselves on that depth of knowledge, right? And up until recent time, that's been the thing that's helped them kind of get the sale, is having that knowledge. But as we say today, customers, prospects can already discern whether they've got that capability or not. But one of the things I would say has been fairly common, and I don't know yet whether that's evolving, and I'm interested in your experience in this, is that as a consequence, that engineering type really has a great discomfort with the notion of this thing called selling. Yeah?
Yeah, there is a little bit of that because of the reputation sales has. We still get that hangover from that. You're there to manipulate. You're there to sell me stuff I don't want to. That isn't really going to work. It's not going to solve my problem. And so there can be a reticence to enter into that. I think there's a couple of things going on. Often people's path into the sales role is that they will have been customer facing. What will have happened is customer's got a problem. They get brought in because they are the expert in it. They talk to the customer about that. Customer thinks they're brilliant because they've solved it. Everything was very easy. They get the reputation of someone who's awesome in front of customers because they're doing that specific thing.
You ought to go into sales. Well, yeah, I ought to. It seems to be okay. I do it all right. Off you go then. Right. No one's told them all the other stuff you've got to do, which is actually now getting in front of people and opening the conversation and moving towards getting that technical conversation. Oh, and by the way, there's a bunch of people that have to pay for this stuff. Yeah, that might put you through a process with another set of departments. And so all these other roles, and actually that's a really big deal. Senior people might be wanting to have a little overview on this. It's like, whoa, hang on a minute. My chat with my mates was easy. That's more difficult. So yeah, that sort of thing goes on. And then there's
Yeah.
I've also identified I summarised some of these things into three main blockers, which I could talk about in a bit if you want.
Yeah.
The way I
All right. We'll
bucket
come
them,
back
if
to
you
those.
like.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of pick up on something that you said there at kind of the beginning of that little paragraph. And that was somebody said, you ought to be in sales. Right. And often as not, the bit sometimes it gets stated, but the rationale for that is, of course, because you've got the gift of the gab.
Oh,
Yeah. You could talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles. Oh, you'd be perfect in sales. Right. And so one of the things that I know from what we do because of the site background, like I said to you, we don't call for cover letters, we don't ask for resumes. We do look at people's career history and we look at their LinkedIn profile. But far more importantly, what we're interested in and the way we go about screening and selecting top talent is by getting a deep understanding of their behavioral architecture, their hardwiring. And so as a consequence of that, we've had over 12,000 people apply for sales roles with us over the last 8 years. Every single one of those has gone through some form of profiling. As they go further and further through our screening pipeline, as it were, they do more and more and more. And there's a particular assessment that we run generally only on the people that have made it to the shortlist, but it's one of the most predictively reliable psychometric assessments of its kind in the world to date. For those that are interested, it's called the Profile Sales Assessment. Out of that has emerged a benchmark, right? So when we finally discern, yep, this is a top quartile performer, and we get them to do the PSA, the Profile Sales Assessment, we compare them against this benchmark, and it measures 18 different things, right? One of the things that kind of evolved out of that emerged out of that was kind of interesting, certainly for me to begin with, but certainly for a lot of clients who we would be recruiting for, is this notion that the best kind of salesperson is an extrovert. Turns out to be wrong, false, right? We now have scientific proof, having profiled thousands and thousands and thousands of top quartile B2B solution sellers, that in actual fact, the best of them are what we would describe as ambiverts, right? So clearly you can't be a deep introvert and somebody who hides out in a cave, but this raging extrovert who is the life of the party really does not fly in today's buying world, right? The ambivert is the person who does. So it's interesting that you should go into sales. You've got the gift of the gab. Is almost immediately setting that person up to fail. Yeah. And certainly I would say in my experience, I haven't found that many engineers who've got the gift of the gab. Most of them don't like talking at all.
Yeah, it is interesting. So they have to put on a performance. So it's like, oh, I need to act like this salesperson. Oh, I better watch Wolf of Wall Street or Suits or whatever it is
Yeah.
to start behaving like that. So the stuff that made you good was actually probably that you did listen and you looked at the problem and you solved it. I'm now going to behave in this other way, which wasn't what actually got me why I wanted to be here. I mean, let alone some of the technical skills that haven't been trained in. Yeah, it is an interesting one. Like you saw me. Did you see me grimace when you said the gift of the? You said it twice. I think I kind of flinched both
Yeah.
times. Because it's just sort of like it's such a stereotype. And that kind of hail fellow, well met type person,
Yeah.
everybody's mate. Doing all this. Yeah,
Cheer.
there's nothing wrong with being sort of decent and sort of likable and having a conversation. But if you're basing all your success on being a good fella or fella-ess, yeah, not so good. Not so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then did you think so the words you used, introvert and extrovert, I know
Mm.
you're using them from a psychological point of view, aren't they? It's kind of
Yep.
Jungian, I suppose, based where it's like where your energy focus is. Intro is inside, isn't it? And extra's outside.
Yep.
in my simplistic way of sorry if I've kind of ruined all
Yeah.
psychology for
No, that's
but
on the money.
those words carry a stronger connotation now, don't they? So when they were
Yeah.
originally used, it was that energy thing, that introvert. Oh yeah, it's a shrinking violet wallflower type person. It's just like, no, they're probably just a bit more thoughtful and kind of slower, and I guess as in slower paced, not kind of slow in thinking, but because they're analysing stuff better, which we're trying to make sense of stuff. That's not a bad thing, is it?
Yeah, correct. And so, the way I often describe the two extremes, the introvert and the extrovert, is the introvert kind of subscribes to a way of existing in the world that goes kind of like think, do, think. Now, let me think about this for a moment. Or maybe, oh, actually, yes, that. Then they go and do. And immediately after they've done, they want to stop and think about what they've just done and whether or not that was right and did it get the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. So, by its nature, it's therefore slower and seemingly protracted. And it's very, very internal. The extrovert subscribes to do, think, do, right? I'm going to do something. I've got to do something. I've got to do something. No. Well, let me stop and think about what I just did. Oh, no, go and do. And I'm being extreme as I do that silly example, right? But do, think, do versus think, do, think. Both have got their place. Both have, neither one's right or wrong or better than the other, depending on what the circumstance and the environment is. The other thing about the extrovert, the nature of the extrovert, is that often as not, we see them as being social creatures, and so they're good in social situations. But often as not, they'll be accused of saying stuff without thinking, just blurting something out. And what a lot of people don't understand about the extrovert is what they're actually doing is socializing the idea, right? They'll make a statement. It's not necessarily fully formed. It's not necessarily something they're absolutely convicted to or believe. They're kind of putting it out there into the ether for other people to grab a hold of and add to and bat around and, challenge and question and all that kind of thing. So, when we then look at the ambivert, that person that sits pretty much in the middle, they've got that capacity. They're comfortable with socializing, right? And you definitely need to have that in sales. You're selling to another bunch of human beings, and so you've got to have that comfort of having conversation with them and socializing a concept, an idea, a product, a solution, et cetera, et cetera. But you've also got to be good at listening. Right. And so that posing of the question has then got to be followed up with a moment of silence, which, of course, the extreme extrovert has difficulty with, silence.
Yeah, and once they've
I'm going to
started,
fill that with more noise. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it's almost like selecting the mode, isn't it? If you can sit in the middle, you can go, what's the best mode that I need to deploy now? This
Yeah.
person is saying stuff. They're thinking out loud. Shut up. Move to think. So take note of what they're saying, pick up on some decent stuff that we could then put back to them. Or,
Yeah.
right, I'm going this way because I'm into presentation mode, or I'm going to table an idea. Let me I'll be rattling the cage a little bit, or shining a light, putting a perspective in. I'm going into talk mode, but then I'm probably going to go back into here. So you're being very selective about where you're putting yourself to what you're doing at that time for the best outcome for the customer. To round out then for the Sales Today podcast, where can people get in touch with you if they wanted to sort of discuss this more or kind of hear a bit more, the psychometric or the assessment that you mentioned? Where do they get in touch?
Yeah. Probably the best place to kind of find me is going to be LinkedIn. So it's just James Michael, based in Orange in Sydney. Alternatively, hop onto the website, which is justifiedtalent.com. And yeah, you'll find my ugly mug up there on a video and some little buttons you can press to make contact.
Awesome, and we'll pop a link to that into the show
Cool.
notes as well. So brilliant.
Excellent.
Well, thanks for taking the time to sort of turn the tables and to extract some stuff. And to be fair, you've shared loads of good stuff too. So
Thank you, mate.
yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.